With Oppenheimer released worldwide and doing very successfully in the box office, I think it's a fairly good time to do a list of the best films that Christopher Nolan has ever done in his whole entire filmography. Now, I'm going to do the list from worst to best. Now, I don't consider any of the films that he's ever directed in his whole entire career as bad. I'm a big Nolan fan. Might be a little too biased, but I don't care. I'm a fan of his work, and I'm going to do a list based on whatever I believe are the best films in chronological order. So yeah, I personally believe that he hasn't directed a film that is bad yet, and I've liked and loved pretty much every single film that he's ever done. So let's start the list from, again, worst to best in his whole entire filmography. Alright, so for a debut feature film, this is very solidly done, but in comparison to the rest of his filmography, I would say Following is his weakest movie. But in terms of showcasing the later trademarks that he will become famous for, this is the perfect film because he showcases everything that he will later on use in his bigger and much better films, like the usage of non-linear storylines. It's shown very well here. And, shadowy figures, their ambiguous moralities in terms of are they good, are they bad? The film noir utilization that he uses in the story, it is all very well done. And again, for such a small budget and for your debut feature film, which technically I consider as a long short film because it is just above 1 hour in runtime. And if you do want to see it, it's on YouTube. So if you want to see hints of the future master in terms of his craft, this is a perfect movie to watch. But in my personal opinion, the weakest of the bunch of films that he's directed so far in his whole entire career. All right, so again, this is kind of tough for me to say because I love Insomnia. I love the atmosphere. I love the cinematography in this film. Very creepy performance from Robin Williams and a good performance from Al Pacino and also a good performance from Hilary Swank. I love the music in this film. But again, he's directed so many great movies in his entire career that even though this is the second last movie in my ranking, it is still very solid. In my personal opinion, I feel like every movie that Christopher Nolan has ever done is either very good or above. So this is still a very good movie, but in comparison to the rest of his filmography, I don't love it as much as maybe some other people do. But again, Insomnia is still a very solid film. Alright, so I know a lot of people online love to hate on Tenet, but I personally really loved it. I loved how Christopher Nolan mixed in quantum physics with his James Bond espionage type of story. And if you know Christopher Nolan and his history in terms of why he wanted to make movies, one of the reasons why is because he is a big James Bond fan. So this is kind of his homage towards the James Bond franchise while making it in his own style. And this is a very solid movie. I know a lot of people love to hate on it online, but for me, it's very sentimental because during the first lockdowns in 2020, this was the only movie playing in theaters. So I watched it a bunch of times and I love it. I know a lot of people love to hate on Tenet, but I personally loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was a very good movie and it was such a blast. And such a great way to forget about the rest of the world in terms of the COVID and, lockdowns and everything. So for me, it's sentimental, but in comparison to the rest of his filmography, it is not as strong. So to be fair, it is his third worst film, but it's still a very good movie. All right, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I really love Dunkirk. But I felt like in comparison to the other films that he's directed is not as strong. Now again, this is a very thrilling film, a very solidly done World War II epic, great pacing, great sound mixing, great music from Hans Zimmer, great cinematography from Hoyt van Hoytema, and great supporting characters here played by Tom Hardy, Cillian Murphy, Mark Rylance, and Kenneth Branagh. I love their performances. The big minus for me was that the main character and the soldiers around him did not perform as well as the supporting characters. Very visceral, very thrilling, very fast-paced thriller, and a very good World War II epic, but in comparison to the other films he's directed, I didn't love it as much as the next few films that I'm going to be listing. I know some of you in the comments are going to be like, how is The Dark Knight Rises better than Dunkirk? For me personally, this was a great conclusion to the trilogy. It is weak in comparison to The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, but I still love it. I think it's a great summer blockbuster, had great performances. There are some hiccups here and there, I get it, but whatever. This is, again, another sentimental watch for me because I remember watching it in 2012 summer 3 times. And each time I had a blast. And it was so sad to watch the ending because like I knew that this was the last time that Christopher Nolan was doing a Batman movie. And it was so great. And there's just something about this movie every time I watch it, even though I know it's not as good as the other two films in the trilogy, it just has this aura to it that I still love. And there's so much positives here. And sadly, is the last time that Wally Feitzer worked with Christopher Nolan. And I think it's just, again, great movie overall. But yeah, again, these are just my personal opinions. It's a slightly better movie than Dunkirk, but not as good as the other films I'm going to list from here on out. Batman Begins is the film that revitalized and revolutionized the comic book film genre and helped reboot and bring back to life the excellent character of Bruce Wayne / Batman. I love Batman Begins. I think it's slightly better than The Dark Knight Rises, but it's not as better as the other films that I'm going to list out. But again, this is a very good movie. It's highly influential to other films till this day. And a lot of franchises started to revitalize their franchises with darker imagery and storylines thanks to the way that Batman Begins helped make Batman go into a darker light. Again, great movie. Great way to see how films have been changed since then because of this one movie. And just a really fun movie in general. I think this is probably one of the most adventurous films that Christopher Nolan's ever done as well. Prestige is probably Christopher Nolan's most underrated film in his whole entire career. And I really thought it wasn't that good when I first watched it. But when I rewatched it, I realized how great of a movie this is. Great duel between Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale here. Great performances, great production design, and one of the greatest twists in the 2000s. I loved this movie when I rewatched it and is one of my favorites now. And I consider it as a very highly underrated film in general and definitely Nolan's most underrated movie in his whole entire filmography as well. Interstellar is an excellent movie. I love it so much. It is an excellent film about space. It's an excellent sci-fi movie. It's an excellent film about humanity and love. And you know, people have this critique of Christopher Nolan being the sterile, very unemotional director. This is his most emotional film, and it's one of the most emotional films in the last few decades in general. I get emotional whenever I see that last 20 minutes or so of this movie. It's just very well done. Excellently acted, excellently produced, excellently shot. It's just everything's excellent about this movie. Hans Zimmer's score in this film is excellent. Till this date, it is one of the biggest robberies that he never won an Academy Award for Best Original Score for this film because it is outstanding. And if you never heard it on vinyl, please do because it's so good. And it is one of my favorite movie-going experiences. Watching this in IMAX was so, so cool. And if you still haven't seen Interstellar somehow, please do because it's such a great movie. You might be surprised by the ranking of Oppenheimer here. I might be a little bit surprised too. But I think maybe recency bias aside, this is a very solid movie. It is such a great way to revitalize the biopic genre because the movie's not really your prototypical biopic. The first hour might be a little bit. The second hour is this great tense thriller in terms of how they made the bomb. And then the last hour is this political conspiracy / drama that is, it's so creative. Again, Nolan is so creative in terms of the way that he showcases the black and white scenes and the color scenes and just making a talkie this engaging, and especially on IMAX, superb. Great movie. Again, recency bias aside, this is still an excellent movie overall. This is the film that made Christopher Nolan into the director that he is today. Memento is such an excellent film. I don't want to give anything away about this movie if you've never seen it before. This movie is so good. It is one of the greatest small budget films I've ever seen in my whole entire life. One of the greatest edited films of all time. Mind-bendingly amazing. And it's so well done. Just go watch it if you've never seen it before. Inception in 2010. I watched this movie so much times. I love Inception. So cool, so stylistic, so amazing, so creative. It is one of my favorite movies of all time and one of the greatest thrill rides and one of the most smartest thrill rides I've ever seen in a summer blockbuster. Amazing movie, but it's not Christopher Nolan's best film. This is, in my personal opinion, Christopher Nolan's best film of all time. It is not just one of the best films of all time history. It is the greatest comic book film of all time. I watched this on the first weekend with my dad. It was one of the greatest movie-going experiences of my life. Amazing film. Amazing.